There comes a moment in your journey where the map you've been following simply stops making sense. The things you once craved no longer excite you. The people who once felt like home begin to feel foreign. And the identity you wore so confidently starts to crumble in your hands like dust. It's not a breakdown, it's not failure, and it's not depression. It's a shift of soul architecture. You didn't choose this, it chose you. Not because you were ready, but because your frequency evolved beyond the blueprint you were still trying to live in. That's why time feels strange. That's why the days blur. Why your body is exhausted. Why your intuition is louder than ever, yet harder to explain. Because you're not just going through change, you're standing inside a spiritual migration. And here's the part most people miss. This shift isn't going to wait for your plans, your goals, or your comfort zone. It doesn't care if you're prepared. It moves according to truth. And when it arrives, it dismantles anything that was built on distortion. That includes your roles, your habits, your rhythms, even your dreams. But this isn't loss. It's liberation. You're not falling behind. You're falling out of what you've outgrown. This video isn't just here to describe what you're feeling. It's here to name it, to anchor it, to remind you you're not lost. You're in transit. And the space between who you were and who you're becoming is sacred. Something fundamental changed in the collective field, not because of an event, not because of astrology, but because the energetic template that used to hold our stories together has dissolved. We're now living in the space between timelines, where the old no longer fits and the new hasn't fully arrived. It's a vibrational gap. And in that gap, everything constructed on autopilot begins to unravel. That's why you feel ungrounded, why your passions flicker in and out, why the future feels blurred and the past feels irrelevant. Because you're not just questioning your life, you're being ejected from frequencies that no longer match your soul's signature. But here's the nuance. This shift doesn't explode. It fades in. Subtle, silent, systematic. At first, it shows up as restlessness, as a craving for something you can't name. Then the dissonance grows. You start to notice how much of your life was built on momentum, not alignment. You begin sensing that your environment is too loud for your sensitivity, that your routine is too tight for your evolution, that the way you've been moving through the world isn't sustainable anymore. And it's not because you're breaking down. It's because you're tuning in to a higher frequency that demands more presence, more truth, more integrity from every part of you. What's wild is that most of this shift is invisible. There's no external marker, no social validation, no linear explanation. Because the universe doesn't announce evolution. It initiates it through contrast, through collapse, through quiet inner instructions that say, this part of you must go. It's time for something more honest. And when the field changes, everything that was sustained through force begins to decay. Not to punish you, but to liberate your energy from false architecture. This is why you're craving solitude. This is why the familiar feels foreign. This is why the things that once made you feel alive now leave you numb. You're not regressing. You're resonating differently. And now your soul is stripping away every mask it once used to survive. There comes a point in spiritual evolution where your soul starts rewriting your reality without asking your permission. Not out of cruelty, but necessity. Because you've reached a vibrational edge. And everything beyond it must be built in truth. That edge, that's what you're standing in right now. It's not anxiety, it's not burnout, it's not failure, it's resonance rupture, a moment where the frequency of your being no longer fits inside the form of your life. And the pressure you're feeling isn't weakness. It's your soul pushing outward, breaking through the identity you once needed just to survive. Let's name it for what it is. You are outgrowing your own story. And like a snake shedding skin, the process is uncomfortable, awkward, and impossible to reverse once it starts. But here's what makes it so disorienting. Your nervous system was trained to hold your past self, the one that coped, overfunctioned, performed, explained, apologized, endured. It's not used to stillness. It's not used to freedom. It's not used to alignment. So now that alignment is arriving, your system misreads it as a threat. That's why you're tired. That's why you're uncertain. That's why joy feels muted and peace feels suspicious. Because your body is detoxing from an entire lifetime of performing alignment instead of embodying it. And this shift, it doesn't come in language, it comes in sensation. You start to notice the difference between peace and numbness, between passion and performance, between love and obligation. You feel it in your stomach when you enter the wrong room. You feel it in your chest when you're asked to play a role you've outgrown. You feel it in your energy when something familiar now feels energetically repelling. And that's not dysfunction. That's truth trying to re enter your field. The collapse you feel is not chaos, it's clarity tearing through false construction. You're not falling apart. You're falling out of agreement with a version of reality that was never fully yours. That's why your voice is changing. Why you pause before answering. Why you suddenly crave silence, solitude, and space you used to avoid. Not because you're isolating, because you're recalibrating. Your soul is teaching your body what it feels like to live in resonance. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Resonance often requires loss. Not because loss is holy, but because you've been holding too much of what was never in frequency with your becoming. That looks like releasing dreams that were built on fear, letting go of relationships that depended on your suppression, walking away from environments that demanded your self-betrayal, questioning beliefs you inherited instead of chose. This doesn't make you lost. It makes you honest. And spiritual honesty is the beginning of embodiment. Because now you can no longer pretend, no longer shrink, no longer explain what your soul simply knows. You are becoming someone your past couldn't imagine. And that version of you, they don't need constant direction. They carry an inner compass. But to reach that version, the old must be laid to rest. Not with resistance, but with reverence. The grief you feel isn't just for what you're leaving, it's for who you had to be to survive it. So give yourself grace. Give your body time. Give your energy space to reorganize. You are not lost. You are in alignment-induced amnesia, the temporary forgetting of the old self, before the true one is ready to stabilize. Stay here. Let the unraveling continue. Because on the other side of this dissolution is the life that finally fits. When your soul begins outgrowing its former life, the process doesn't unfold like a lightning strike. It arrives like erosion, soft, slow, relentless. And before the renewal, there is always the unraveling. You begin forgetting how to be the version of yourself that once felt so natural. Not because you failed, but because that self was built in response to environments that no longer exist. There are 5 core phases in this soul migration. They don't move in order. They spiral, they overlap, they return when you least expect them. But understanding them helps you hold yourself when it all feels like too much. Phase 1, the subtle crack. It begins without fireworks. Just a faint sense that the life you've built no longer quite fits your skin. Everything still works, but nothing quite resonates. You wake up with a heavy sigh. You smile through conversations that feel empty. You go through motions that used to feel meaningful. And in the quiet between your thoughts, you hear it. This isn't mine anymore. That's the first crack, the signal. The soft tap from your higher self that says, what once served you has expired. Phase 2. The distortion becomes visible. Now that you've heard the whisper, you begin seeing through the mask. You recognize the places where you were shrinking to belong. The habits that numbed instead of nourished. The smiles that were survival, not joy. And you can't unsee it. Suddenly, the life you created begins to hollow out. Not because it's broken, because you've outgrown its frequency. And what once made you feel safe now feels like a cage. This is the most disorienting part. Because your outer world still looks the same, but your inner world is unrecognizable. Phase 3, the sacred detachment. This is when the real grief begins. You don't just let go of people or roles, you let go of selves. The version of you who tolerated, stayed quiet, held it together, they begin to dissolve. You may find yourself needing more silence, saying no without explanation, walking away from dynamics you once tried to fix. It feels like isolation, but it's actually reintegration. You're learning to hold your frequency without bending it to be understood, and that's not detachment from love, it's a return to self-loyalty. Phase 4, the inner rebuild. Then quietly, something shifts. You begin to respond differently. You stop chasing, you start choosing. You no longer act from habit, you act from resonance, and that resonance starts shaping your reality. Not quickly, not dramatically, but precisely. Synchronicities return. Your intuition sharpens, you speak, and people listen. Not because you're louder, but because you're clearer. This is where the life that fits begins forming, not from strategy, but from stabilized vibration. Phase 5, the quiet return. This is embodiment, not the performance of healing, the anchoring of truth. You don't explain who you are anymore. You simply are. You don't fight for peace. You carry it. You don't negotiate your worth. You radiate it. And from this place, you create, relate, move, love with a frequency that cannot be faked. You have returned, not to who you were, but to who you were always becoming beneath the noise. And the most powerful part? You don't need anyone to see it, because your energy already speaks louder than words ever could. These 5 phases are not a formula, they're a remembering. And if you're in any one of them right now, you're not alone. You're not late. You're not lost. You are in motion. You are being reassembled by resonance. And what you're building now won't require struggle to sustain itself, because it's made of truth. You've felt it, the shedding, the silence, the shift, and by now you know you're not who you used to be. But you're also not fully the person you're becoming. You're in between, and the in between is sacred, but it's also vulnerable, because it's in this in between where you're most likely to second guess yourself, to revert to old patterns, or to chase comfort in what you've already outgrown. That's why this part of the journey demands not perfection, but practice, not more knowledge, but more embodied presence. So here are 7 practices designed to anchor your field, stabilize your nervous system, and hold your becoming while your old identity dissolves. 1. Wake up with ownership, not obligation. The moment you wake up is the most malleable moment of your day. Your field is still open. Your subconscious is still listening. Before you check your phone, before you scroll, sit up in bed, place your feet on the floor, and whisper aloud, I belong to myself. I trust what is unfolding. Today I move with clarity, not fear. This is not about motivation. It's directional grounding. By claiming your frequency before the world pulls on it, you begin to rewire your default settings, from reaction to intention. 2. Choose one truth you no longer negotiate every day. Pick one truth you're no longer willing to dilute. This might be, I need more rest. I'm no longer available for emotional manipulation. I don't want to explain my choices anymore. I'm done performing peace at the cost of my truth. Write it down. Speak it into the mirror. Move through your day as if that one truth is law. Because embodiment doesn't happen all at once. It happens one sacred truth at a time. Held, lived, repeated. Or 3. Energetic cleanse your physical space. Your external space holds your internal story. If you're still surrounded by objects, clothes, clutter, or even digital noise that reflect an outdated identity, your frequency will remain tangled. Today, pick one corner, one drawer, one shelf. Look at it and ask, does this reflect who I'm becoming or who I'm afraid to leave behind? Then act accordingly. Let your physical space become a visual echo of your energetic clarity. Burn herbs. Open windows. Play frequencies. Let light move through the corners where your old self used to hide. 4. Use stillness as a strategy, not a symptom. In a world that glamorizes constant movement, stillness can feel like stagnation. But in a soul transition, stillness is integration. Schedule a stillness window. 10 minutes. No noise, no scrolling, no stimulation. Just your breath. Just your body, just your presence. Let the discomfort rise, let the silence speak. Let your energy reorganize without interruption. Because clarity rarely arrives in motion. It arrives in quiet self-contact. 5. Name the grief, even if it has no story. One of the most misunderstood parts of spiritual evolution is the unnameable grief. You may feel sorrow, but not know why. You may cry unexpectedly, feel nostalgic for a life you never lived, ache for a version of yourself you're still meeting. This is not confusion. This is grief without narrative, the emotional residue of energetic death. So don't dismiss it. Sit with it, write to it. Speak it aloud. I honor the parts of me that kept me alive. I grieve the roles I no longer need. I thank the illusions that gave me temporary safety. And now, I release them. Tears are not weakness. They are emotional alchemy. 6. Protect your glow through discernment. You're more sensitive now. That's not regression. It's refinement. So it's time to protect your nervous system as if it were sacred territory. Because it is. That means not explaining your boundaries, not consuming chaotic content out of habit, not spending time in environments that spike your nervous system, not oversharing your process with people who haven't earned your vulnerability. Discernment is not defense. It's energetic maturity. Let your glow be earned, not drained. 7. Close each day with completion. Every night, your field asks to be cleared, not just from what happened, but from what you held. Before you sleep, sit upright in bed. Place your hands over your heart. Breathe deeply and say, I release what's not mine. I return what I carried unconsciously. I invite rest into every cell of my becoming. Visualize your body surrounded by light. See anything heavy dissolve. Not because you solved it, but because you no longer need to carry it into the next day. Let your sleep be a bridge to integration, not a pause from chaos. These 7 practices aren't tasks. They're containers, ways to hold the sacred in between, to ground the invisible shift, to tend to the soul, not just the schedule. Because the person you're becoming isn't arriving through effort. They're arriving through embodiment. And every breath you take in presence is a step deeper into that truth. If you've made it here, not just to the end of a video, but to the edge of who you were, then breathe. Because what you've just walked through wasn't just a teaching, it was a transmission. And you didn't just hear it, you felt it, the tightness, the resonance, the grief, the relief, the deep exhale that says, this is where I am, and I finally understand why. You're not broken, you're not behind, you're not falling apart, you're becoming clear. You're witnessing the final layers of a self you no longer need, sliding off with grace, with reverence, with power. And what's rising underneath isn't fragile, it's real. This is the version of you that doesn't perform to be loved, that doesn't abandon themselves to belong, that doesn't shrink in the presence of noise, but radiates in the presence of truth. You don't need to explain yourself anymore. You don't need to prove your path, because your presence speaks what your words never could. I remember who I am, and I'm not going back. If this message cracked something open in you, honor it. Drop a comment below. What phase are you in? What are you shedding? What version of you is finally being seen? Your words don't just express your truth, they stabilize it. They anchor the frequency for others who haven't found the words yet. Be that mirror. Share this video if someone in your life is quietly unraveling and thinks they're alone. They're not. We are walking this together, not in performance, but in presence. Subscribe not just to stay connected to content, but to stay connected to yourself. Because this isn't just a channel, it's a signal, a sanctuary, a shared frequency, and every time you return more whole. So take one last deep breath. Let the message settle into your field. Let the silence echo your truth. And when you're ready, walk forward, not as someone who's trying to find the path, but as someone who finally knows they are the path. You're not waiting for the next version of yourself. You're becoming it now.